damit kommen wir zu einem nächsten Kapitel, immer noch im Bereich klassische Musik. Was haben wir vor? Ich trage mich schon seit meiner Vorbereitungszeit für die Intendanz hier in Frankfurt mit dem Gedanken, den du angesprochen hast, Klaus, nämlich mit der Frage, was passiert, wenn man Künstler, die keine Musiker sind, einlädt, mit uns gemeinsam über Musik nachzudenken. Und das Glück wollte es, dass ich vor einem guten Jahr Daniel Libeskind kennenlernen konnte. Und ich habe ihn gefragt, ob er interessiert wäre, für die Alte Oper ein Konzertprojekt zu entwickeln. Es war eine ganz offene Einladung, ohne jegliche sozusagen Bedingungen oder Vorgespräche. Es war eine offene Einladung, haben Sie Lust, mit uns über Konzert nachzudenken? Und er hatte Lust und es war eine große Freude, ein Jahr diesen Dialog zu führen. Ich darf ihn herzlich willkommen heißen. Daniel, it's so great to have you with us tonight. And please come on stage, let's talk about your project. Come.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Take a seat.
Thank you. Thank you.
So great to have you.
So lucky to be here.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
How should we start? I mean, you're worldwide known as an architect, obviously. That's your profession. Tonight, we don't have a chance to really cover your architectural work. Of course, we would need like many evenings and many other partners to discuss that. But to start the conversation, perhaps you could just have a look at two of the major projects of your life as an architect. Both were mentioned already in the beginning of this evening. It's the Jewish Museum in Berlin, and it's the master plan for Ground Zero in New York. So perhaps you look at the Jewish Museum, which was your first building.
Yes.
You made the concept for. We have some pictures, and perhaps you could just describe key thoughts of this extraordinary building in Berlin.
Well, thank you so much. First of all, I want to say how honored I am to be here with Dr. Pauly and in this fantastic Alte Oper that I have visited many times. This is my first building. I never even built a small addition to a building. I never worked in an architectural office. I'm trained as an architect, but I followed a different path. And I was lucky to win this competition, which I usually say, you know, it's easy to win a competition, but it's usually a ticket to oblivion, because how do you then build a building?
Right.
But I was lucky that I was able to realize this as my first building. And it, of course, deals with many, many visceral, emotional, but also intellectual ideas about what happened in Berlin in those tragic years, what happened before, when Berlin was a kind of a capital of the world of culture as well. And I tried to imbue the building with a story, with a certain story, which is not really a literal story. It's not a sentimental or nostalgic story, but a story on different levels, which is a story in light, a story in sound, in sort of echoing sounds of the acoustics of the building, but also in a spatial sense of telling something that only architecture can tell, that you know, you can write a book or you can do something else, but architecture has its own mission, especially if the mission is to create a museum, which is a Jewish museum.
A good example might be to have a look at the so-called voids,
Yes.
which go through the building.
Well, this was the most difficult part of the building to build. You know, it is a public building. When I proposed that there be a space that is not really to be used for any exhibitions, because it's not heated, air-cooled, it doesn't have the purpose to exhibit anything, but really to stand for something that cannot be exhibited. That was the most challenging part to build, because the whole building is a segmented, you know, you don't enter an atrium to the building, there is no resolution, there is no some sort of a statement, but you enter a segments of a void, which are kind of the central organizing principle of the entire building, and the building sort of develops around it in different geometries in a reference to different, very often not visible things in Berlin, of addresses, of people who lived near the site, emblems of Berlin and so on.
And I think the content which cannot be displayed, you found a way to make it as an experience for the people who visited. When I visited the place for the first time, The first thing you discover is there is no entrance. You have to go down, very deep down. The floors are not in balance. They are out of equilibrium. It made me feel very uncomfortable, strange, dizzy. My body got into another tensioned situation. It was a real physical experience to get into this space and to enter the museum.
Well, I believe that that was the means that I used. It's not to simply confirm one's idea of stability of architecture, but to communicate not only through the mind, through the intellectual ideas that we have about the past, about the future, but something very close to our own feelings and emotions, which cannot really be articulated in any other way but by walking into a space. And by the way, in a competition which had almost 200 different architects from around the world, I was the only one to propose no bridge between the Baroque building and the new building. There is a bridge, but you don't see it. It's in the underground. And I thought a lot about it, because I thought about the Enlightenment, and Berlin is so famous for its Enlightenment, Schopenhauer's quote, and you know, Berlin is the city, you know, of modern existential worlds, between Hegel and Kierkegaard and so on. But I wanted to create a different understanding of the Enlightenment, the darkness in the light of that Enlightenment. And so I created a very different topography for the visitor. It's not an obvious way to enter a building. No. It's not an obvious way to navigate through a building, but I think it's one way to tell a story that the museum wants to tell, which is about a past which is difficult to imagine, and a future which is, of course, bright, but also full of the past.
The museum was opened with a permanent exhibition on 9/11, and this opened for your biography a new chapter of your life. Later, you won the competition for the master plan of Ground Zero. We see some drawings. Can you speak a little bit about key thoughts
strange, of that? What a strange life, how strange life is. You know, I worked in the museum for 12 years. I lived in Berlin, and the museum had a, you know, sort of a private opening, and it was to open to the public on September 11, 2001, for the first time. And I remember going to the studio that morning and saying to everybody, you know, this is the first day I don't have to think about history in the museum, because people will enter and they will have their own experience. And just about 2:38 in the afternoon, we saw the pictures of those horrible pictures on the screens. And, you know, the museum was to open that evening at 7:30 in the evening to the public, but it never did. And how strange that I then, when I saw those images, I turned to my wife and partner, Nina, and my colleague, and I said, I'm going back to New York. I'm going back to Lower Manhattan. I had no idea what I was saying, but I was determined to go back and to try to do something. There was much before the competition was even announced. And how strange that I actually wound up being a master planner of this very complex, difficult, controversial, politically charged and emotionally charged site, which is underway.
That are drawings you made. Perhaps we can also have a look at this model, and you could explain a little bit what key ideas of the whole landscape of this building, this complex would be.
This is a very early model. I made many. You can see the Lower Manhattan. You see that what I did, which was different from my colleagues, who are great architects and friends of mine, everybody proposed to build big buildings in the center of the site. Large-scale building, maybe one building, mega structures, two buildings. I did something else. I suggested not to build anything where people perished. Even though it's a piece of real estate, no one declared it a sacred ground. I thought it was not a good place to build buildings. And I thought it should be open for a public space, for a memorial that would really go deep to the bedrock of the place. You cannot see here the slurry wall, which is there, but I suggested the footprints be recorded, that there would be waterfalls, and to distribute the density of 10 million square feet of office space to as many buildings as possible. Not as few, but as many. So I distributed to 5 buildings, making the buildings as low as possible, not as high as possible, in order to create a good street sense, a sense of balance between memory and something really exciting about New York of the future. And that's indeed, you know, of course it has to go through many iterations, but that is what is under construction today.
Also there, you incorporated ideas and symbolic thoughts in your concept. This is a model, a photo, where you see very clearly the relationship between the Statue of Liberty and what you thought as master plan for Ground Zero?
Well, I was, you know, it's not an abstract thought. I was an immigrant to New York, and I was probably one of the last immigrants to come to New York by a ship, because later it became much cheaper to fly, you know, by airplane. But as I was woken up by my mother with my sister at 4:30 in the morning, as the ship was sort of entering the Hudson River, I stood on the ship, as all immigrants have always done, looking at this amazing skyline, at this symbolic entrance for poor people, immigrants, the disenfranchised, people escaping from totalitarian regimes. And that's what I actually thought about when I was doing I didn't do it for just a picture to build a building, to build a master plan, but I thought, you know, what is it for New Yorkers? And what is it for those who can read what Emma Lazarus, the poet whose poem is on the Statue of Liberty, give me, you're tired, you're poor, you reject, the people have been rejected from elsewhere, give them to us, to this open, and of course the skyline of New York was something that inspired me when I saw it. It was kind of something, you know, when you come from Poland via, you know, different countries, and you're 13 years old, 14 years old, it's something amazing to see the skyline in reality from a ship. And so I kept on to that idea that, you know, the Declaration of Independence, 1776 feet high, of Tower Number 1, Freedom Tower, it's symbolic that the building is not just the highest building in America or something, but it represents a date that one should remember because it's a document of human rights, one of the first. The same thing is true of the Torch of Liberty, which really is echoed by the composition of large-scale buildings, and the flame in the center, which is the memory and the museum and the public space that it opens.
It would be fantastic to go on and to speak more about those projects. You gave us a beautiful, quick overview to get the sense of your thoughts here, but the project we're talking about is actually not about architecture. It's about space, but it's not about architecture. It's a music project. And what many people don't know, music is a very important part of your biography, because as a child, you started as a musician.
That's true. Maybe it was a fatal start, but I have to tell you the story, because it's really a story I've thought about a lot about it. What I'm doing today is very connected to that story. You know, I grew up in Poland, in Łódź. In the early 50s, Poland was not under the dark clouds of communism, but a deep-seated, visceral anti-Semitism, which is both state organized and in the society in general, our neighbors. And I wanted to play the piano. And my parents, when I was very young, and my parents, I dreamed about it, and my parents said, we'll get you a piano. And then my father came home with a suitcase, and he opened it, and I saw a fragment of a piano, the keyboard. The rest I didn't recognize. It was the accordion. And my father said to me, you know, we are Jews. We cannot bring the piano to the courtyard, because all our neighbors will see it, and they'll say, you see, the rich Jews are bringing the piano. And in my small head at that time, I thought, how could they think rich Jews? Four of us lived in 2 small rooms in which piano could hardly even fit. But that was the instrument I played, and I loved it. I was actually in the first program of when Polish television started. They invited me to play on it. And when I came to Israel from Poland in 1957, I continued to study in music, and my teacher there inscribed me into a competition, the America-Israel competition for music, which takes place in Tel Aviv. And I came to that room. There were hundreds of people, some older, some young, all carrying cellos and violins, trombones, sometimes drums, singing. I was the only person with a suitcase. And when I entered, you know, I saw the room. They you know, go to the competition room. They would exit pretty quickly with really sad expressions. It was clear that it was not very easy to win this competition. So a lot of people went in and out, and then my name was called, and I came in. My father carried this very heavy suitcase. My accordion was 3.5 octaves in height. All you could see is my head and my feet. There was hardly anything in between. And when I strapped it and opened the bellows, I saw 3 very perplexed faces in front of me. Mrs. Kusewicki, the great patron of music, Zino Francescati, the violinist, and Isaac Stern, the head of the jury. And I think they never saw an accordion so close to their eyes, you know. And I think they had maybe in retrospect, I see kind of cynical smiles, like how is this possible to be happening to us? But I think after the third chord of the toccata in D minor, which I transcribed, they stopped smiling. And when I finished with my sort of bravura piece, which was Rimsky-Korsakov's Flight of the Bumblebee, which is really an extraordinary piece of music, Isaac Stern took me aside, put his hand in a very solicitous manner, and said, you know, Daniel, you've already exhausted all the virtuosity possibilities of this instrument. You have to go from the vertical to the horizontal. You have to go to the piano. And, you know, next thing I was standing on the stage with a slightly older boy with crutches. It was Itzhak Perelman, who's also one of the winners.
Look at that, here's the photo.
Oh yeah, there it is. I was trained. But you know, I have to tell you that Isaac Stern planted a seed of doubt in my mind. He undermined, you know, I felt like a jilted lover, you know, whose piano never arrived. And I discovered another instrument, you know, it was a thin piece of wood with a piece of graphite in it, piece of paper. And I was continuing my musical life in a different form. And so music is not a footnote in my, and the accordion is not my footnote in my life. It's really intertwined with everything I've done. I've never would be an architect had I not played the accordion.
The project you developed for the Alte Oper during the last year has the title One Day in Life. When we met for the very first time, talking about that idea, you immediately came up with this idea of one day of 24 hours. So tell us, what's the key thoughts of the concert project you developed?
Well, well, first of all, I was lucky to meet Dr. Pauly, who has such a broad sense of openness. But I thought, you know, it would be incredible to do a kind of cross-section of a city in a very compressed form of time, you know, from dawn till twilight, till the night, and compress the mind into an exploration of both the space of the city and the space of music as they really go together in some strange and unexpected way. Because we often think of music performed in concert halls and so on. But I thought of places where music is not normally, one does not normally associate music with a hospital, with a train station, with an underpass under a highway, with a bath, with a school, whatever. Create a connection between places that really have to do with the unexplored elements of the city, maybe sometimes unknown, neglected, and a very particular musical experience that makes music really come alive in a different way.
What came out of this thought is a concept where you propose that within 24 hours, one day, concerts will take place in very different locations all over Frankfurt, places that are not, like you just said, naturally connected with music, and we are all invited to walk from concert to concert. So it's kind of a journey.
It is a journey, and it's a journey even for people who have lived in Frankfurt. I don't live in Frankfurt. I've been here really hundreds of times. But it's a journey, it's an unexpected journey to places that are so close and at the same time so far. And I think that the close and the far can be brought together by an experience that only perhaps music and that kind of encounter, you know, it's the wonder of encountering something that brings the space of architecture and the time of music into a whole.
To be played in the different locations, but also you connected the locations and the music with dimensions of human life. And we put them here, dimensions like memory, knowledge, situation, simulation, death and birth. Yeah. So that's all ideas who describe our existence, our human life. Is that like the triangle we will go through and experience?
In a way, it's kind of three-dimensional in some way, because it brings the dimension of music, the dimension of the place in Frankfurt, the dimension of human life. Working life, it's not a special life, it's just the everyday life, where you go to work, where you travel, where you come evening home, and so on. It brings them together in an unexpected sort of prism in which music flourishes in a totally different way, and in which a space also, I think, comes alive in a different way. So these are sort of the emblems of an experience which I think is an experience of music, not only of the city.
Let's give some examples for musical ideas you have. You chose a very broad approach from ancient music, Baroque music, classical, up to contemporary. So it's a panorama of your musical knowledge and taste.
Well, it's really my love for music, and I was so lucky to be given the chance to bring together composition which I love to listen to, which inspire me, and at the same time places which interest me, in Frankfurt particular spaces. And I think this coming together will be something that is unique, because it's a cross-section of the mind also, of the viewer, because we are all participants of a community, and at the same time we are also alone. We are solitary, and we have our own secrets. And so to bring these things together in the realm of music, participation, but also reflection, musical reflection, I think is something that, well, you allowed me to sort of go on with the panorama of music. And some buildings are monumental in scale and very large. Some are probably places that perhaps you have not even been, even though they might be very close to where you live. But I think that scale and that sense of emotion and drama is what drives both the city and the compositions that I've chose.
So that means I give some examples. Listen to Gregorian chant, to Monteverdi, to the Four Seasons of Vivaldi, to Lieder of Schubert, to contemporary music by Stockhausen, in places like a hospital, a public bath, a pedestrian underway, a library, a train station, a cemetery. This is going to be a very different context of where we usually listen to music. So it can be quite a life-changing, strong experience.
I think it will be strong because music always has a context, where it is performed, how it is performed, what you see when you're there. I think that is true for all composers. They are aware of that context, and I think the eternity of music is involved with the possibilities of music occupying such spaces that are so labyrinthine in our minds and yet are very open and inviting. And I think that's the joy to me, a joy of a short, because it's only 24 hours, exploration of a drama that I think will perhaps have bigger impact a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, or maybe 3 years later, after one has been there and listened to that particular sound, that particular composition, in that particular unique time, which is that day.
That 24 hours, yeah, that one day in life. You made a beautiful drawing. You made a drawing about this project, or thinking about this project. We see it right here.
Oh,
yeah. So,
well,
so tell us, how did you come to that drawing to reflect what you were thinking about?
It's actually quite a scientific drawing. If you take the map of Frankfurt, you will see that it is a very accurate description of a sequence of events in the city that has a logic. But it's not only the logic of the rational calculation of the mind, it's also the logic of the dreams one has when walking on those particular streets, through those particular spaces. So it's kind of an emblematic suggestion for a score which involves the larger urban spaces, but also a very, very personal and individual way to be able to participate in the event.
So it can be a rediscovery of Frankfurt, the town we live in. It can be a rediscovery of spaces we know, or discover spaces we didn't know, and it can be an amazing listening experience because we are exposed to music which we normally know from a normal context, and the context changes.
Well, all of us think we know everything. We know music, we know architecture, we know the city we live in. But I think we don't really know them that well. And there is a depth to our unconscious, which sometimes by an accidental encounter can trigger a very deep, both retrospective and prospective view of oneself. And I think that's what music is, that's what space is, that's what the story of our day perhaps will be. And I think it will be interesting because if someone will participate in it, they will commit themselves. Even at night, I think.
Yes.
Deep in the night, there will be some insomnia.
Absolutely right. It's going to be an extraordinary project. It's going to be in May 2016, so there is still time to go. To close our conversation of tonight, let's have a look at like normal concert life. Like, do you go to concerts, and what do you think about the normal concert format we have like on a day-to-day basis? We have orchestra concerts, chamber music, solo recitals all over the world in all of those different concert halls around the world. Is that format like strong, interesting? Is it boring? Should it be changed?
No, it's very
what do you
interesting.
think?
I love going to concerts, and I'm a great attendee at concerts around the world. Whenever I have the time to do that, I do that religiously. But I often think that that context is not enough, that there is so much more to that music. And the music may have been written hundreds of years ago, and yet the music is always ahead of us in some way, always, leading us somewhere with an arrow that we also have to be sensitive to. So I do think that in an open society, in such a cultivated city as Frankfurt, it's just not only capital of commerce, it's a world capital in many ways of culture, of great literature, of art. I thought, this is an amazing opportunity to reawaken the flame of something that has to do with the spirit of the city of Frankfurt and the spirit of the music that is part of that daily routine, you can say. So I love concerts, I love classical venues, I love concert halls and traditional forms of music, but I also always long for something else. I think, how would that sound under that bridge in a rainy day on a Sunday where everything is closed and it's cold? What would we think? What would we experience of a particular chord or even a passage in a piece of music we've known for a long time in a context which has shifted? And to me, the context is never stable. The world is moving at a tremendous speed, and we are only an insignificant part of the cosmic whole. We are just here for a very insignificant time. So it's worth to me to expand that horizon of who are we, where are we going, where have we come from, what do we think of the future, and how does music and the city we live in guide us in a way that is happy, that is joyful, but has also other dimensions that we might not be thinking when we come to the classical concert hall.
We're looking forward to that project, One Day in Life, so much.
Thank you.
I have to say tonight, after knowing you for 1 year now, I have enjoyed this dialogue with you,
Thank you.
So tremendously. You have such a great knowledge about music,
You're very kind.
you're so passionate about it personally, and also you have a very, very precise intuition how you think about creating context of music and space. So I'm very grateful for this encounter.
Thank you so much.
I'm thrilled about the project, looking forward to May 2016, and I thank you very much.
Thank you
that.
so much, Dr. Pauly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. But thank you.
Amazing.
But stay, we'll listen to music. Have a seat.
Thank you.